Every year, we are pulling more and more fish out of our oceans. And as part of our catches, we're also taking and killing millions of unwanted fish, turtles, sharks, birds, and marine mammals. They're trapped in nets and fishing gear that doesn't discriminate between what fishermen are trying to catch and what they don't want or aren't allowed to keep. By the time the unwanted catch is thrown overboard, it's usually too late. Most are dead or dying. We call this needless waste bycatch.
As you gaze out at the endless ocean, you may wonder, why is bycatch a problem? Surely there's enough fish out there. The reality is that our fishing technologies have become so advanced and the world's population is so immense that we have drastically depleted many marine populations. So you can imagine how devastating it is when we also waste an estimated 1/5 of all the fish taken from the ocean. And it's not just commercial fishing. Sports fishermen are also contributing to the bycatch problem. The ocean's ecosystem is reaching the point of no return. We must end this waste.
Hector's dolphins are only found in one place in the world, in the cool waters off New Zealand.
Hear this sound? After a while, it can drive you crazy, but for the few thousand Hector's dolphins left on Earth, it may be a lifesaver.
The problem is that the fishing activity is being carried out in the area where the dolphins are. They accidentally get caught in the nets that have been set by the fishermen, and they drown and they die.
Off the coast of North America, scientists discovered that a pinger's shrill sound drives harbor porpoises away from deadly fishing nets. So New Zealanders are trying them here with Hector's dolphins.
The dolphin's swimming along, and suddenly it hears the sound of the pinger and it goes, "Hey, what's that?" And therefore is unlikely to become entangled, we hope.
As we'll see, the development of new fishing gear like this pinger is just one of many ways to protect marine life. Whatever the solution, the results are most successful when fishermen, conservationists, and scientists work together to reduce bycatch.
In this steamy Gulf, you'll find one of the richest shrimp fisheries in North America.
It's also one of the most controversial. For years, a battle has raged over two animals: the noble loggerhead sea turtle and the graceful Kemp's Ridley sea turtle. Like humans, these beautiful creatures live for decades, some living to be over 100 years old. These animals must breathe air to survive. So when they get trapped in shrimp nets, they can't surface to breathe, and they drown.
Shrimp trawl bycatch has had a devastating impact on turtles in the Gulf of Mexico, in the South Atlantic, and actually worldwide.
I don't know if nobody likes to kill turtles. Gives you a bad feeling.
To protect these turtles, scientists and fishermen together developed a device called a TED. The TED, or Turtle Excluder Device, is designed so that turtles trapped inside the net can easily slip out through an opening, usually covered with a webbed flap, while at the same time, the shrimp are funneled through and trapped in the net. All U.S. shrimpers are now required to use TEDs in the Gulf of Mexico.
The TEDs today, properly built and installed, will very effectively protect sea turtles, prevent them from drowning, and does so without any significant loss of shrimp.
I've been fishing my whole life, and they want to put these things on us with these big holes in them, and I was real angry with them because I didn't think I could make a living with them.
Yeah, we got them working fairly well, but overall, they still cost you money.
While there is conflict over the requirement to use TEDs, everyone agrees that when used correctly, they significantly reduce sea turtle bycatch. Now the challenge is to get fishermen beyond U.S. waters to use them. Another battle is raging in the Gulf, this time over wasted fish. In this region, approximately 4 pounds of fish are killed just to produce 1 pound of shrimp.
A lot of times we catch a lot of fish for just a very, very small amount of shrimp. Sure do.
20 to 30 million juvenile red snapper die in shrimp trawls in the Gulf of Mexico every year. Till the bycatch problem is addressed, and until it's addressed significantly, red snapper will not recover to healthy levels.
To minimize this problem, scientists and fishermen have developed a new bycatch reduction device. They estimate that if used correctly, it will reduce red snapper deaths by a half. Shrimpers are now required to use this gear in some areas.
In the past, it may have been acceptable to catch and discard the undersized juvenile fish, but in today's world, it's become a necessity that we try to reduce that mortality in order to maintain viable fish stocks.
It's a delicate balancing act between financial sacrifice for today's fishermen and the long-term benefits of a healthy marine ecosystem which will provide jobs for future fishermen.
The North Pacific contains some of the largest and most productive fisheries in the world.
Boats of all sizes fish these waters for cod, pollock, rock sole, and yellowfin sole. The largest boats drag the ocean bottom with nets the size of nearly 2 soccer fields.
Big boats, fishing, very efficient gear, and lots of it.
A net on one of these vessels may bring in 20 to 40 tons of fish.
So you're talking about the capability of taking huge quantities of fish in a very short period of time.
Altogether, the large trawl fleet wastes hundreds of millions of fish. And this doesn't even include what's being taken by Russian and Asian fleets. The U.S. pollock fishery has one of the lowest rates of bycatch in the world. But because the catches are so enormous, even a low rate of bycatch adds up to huge amounts of unwanted fish. In the rock sole and yellowfin sole fisheries, fishing vessels are wasting millions of pounds of halibut, crabs, and other marine life that live on the ocean bottom. Furthermore, their heavy nets damage these creatures' homes as they drag the sea floor. To reduce the region's bycatch, the U.S. government has enacted new rules. One is to monitor bycatch and halt fishing before too much is taken.
We have a very comprehensive observer program. They're sending in their report on the amount of catch that's taken. So even if something is taken as bycatch, that still counts towards a total catch. And when that total catch reaches a limit, the fishery is closed down.
Another rule requires fishermen to keep part of their bycatch instead of throwing it back in the sea.
This in itself is not a conservation solution to bycatch from our point of view, because it's not just about not throwing it back, it's about not catching it in the first place.
As you can see, none of this is simple. Small boats don't have the room to keep everything they catch, and big boats don't want all that they can catch. So scientists and fishermen are testing new nets that will allow some fish to escape, particularly young fish. And fishermen are always looking for new waters to fish where they won't catch what they don't want. Still, for all that's being done to reduce bycatch and protect the ocean's bottom, the effort has just begun.
It's a wonderful place, but it's limited just like any place else on the planet, and we have to take care of it or else we won't have it for the future.
In the warm tropical waters off Central America, you'll find one of nature's most breathtaking sights and one of its most closely guarded secrets.
For some unknown reason, when you see dolphins swimming along the surface, you'll often find tuna swimming below. Years ago, when tuna fishermen used poles and lines, they rarely caught dolphins by accident. That changed, however, with the widespread use of the purse seine net. These nets dramatically increased the tuna catch. But they also trapped and killed more than 100,000 dolphins every year.
Over the period of a decade or so of the 60s, the accidental kill of dolphins in these sets was very high, and the impact on the population was significant.
We didn't want to kill the animals because they're such a beautiful animal.
Some fishermen sought ways to help free the dolphins from the purse seine nets. The first successful procedure was the back-down maneuver.
After the net is deployed around the group, the boat goes in reverse, and the forces created by the boat lengthen the net.
The net is being dragged through the water, and when you're dragging underneath, the dolphins are on the surface and they're floating back toward the cork line.
Suddenly see that the net sinks in front of them, and they take off.
You get too far down, the fish will go over the top too, so you want to keep it just on a given position where the dolphins go out and the fish stay behind.
The back-down maneuver helped, but dolphins were still getting their noses caught in the net.
Dolphins don't swim in reverse, they swim forward. So once they get their snout in there, they would try to fight to get out, and they couldn't go anywhere because that net would hold them in place. So they would drown. So I said, I'm going to try using a smaller mesh where they couldn't stick their snout in there, and they would use that as a ramp to get over the top, and that's how we save the dolphins.
Despite the success of such procedures, pressures mounted to eliminate all dolphin bycatch. U.S. fishermen in the eastern tropical Pacific were forbidden from setting their nets on dolphins while fishing for tuna. So, fishermen began to set their nets on floating objects that attract tuna, often with unexpected results.
The catch of tuna are pretty high, but you also catch a large number of immature small tunas, and you also catch a number of other species.
You do catch more smaller fish, and you catch a lot of the triggerfish and sometimes sharks.
About 1/3 of the tuna that is caught is so small that it is thrown overboard dead.
Are we sacrificing other species to save the dolphins? And in the case of this fishery, it was clear that leading the fishermen or pushing the fishermen away from fishing on dolphins led to increasing bycatch of other species.
Many groups now believe that the most ecologically sound way to catch tuna is to return to the practice of setting nets on dolphins.
As long as you take care to release the dolphins and minimize the dolphin mortality.
We learned the lesson that it was necessary to look at the whole ecosystem and not looking for a single solution that ended up being simple-minded by this lack of perspective.
This is your view of the world, if you're an albatross.
The neatest thing about albatross is that they're so big, very large birds.
The only time they are on land is during the breeding period, when they rear their young. Otherwise, they spend their entire lives out at sea.
Albatross are magnificent creatures. Some can live to be 50 years old, and some mate with one partner for their entire lives. But the albatross's life is threatened by long-line fisheries where baited fish hooks are used to catch tuna, swordfish, and halibut.
When we set our gear out, the hooks are all attached to one big long line, and each hook has bait on it, and the birds come after the bait if it doesn't sink fast enough.
There's a brief period of time where the bait is near the surface. Albatross and other seabirds become occasionally hooked trying to get a free lunch, capitalizing on the bait as it goes over the side.
As with all free lunches, there's a price to pay. The albatross swallows the hook and is dragged under, where it inevitably drowns. Thousands of albatross and other seabirds are killed this way every year.
There are basically two ways of keeping seabirds from getting caught on longline gear. Get the gear away from the birds as fast as possible, mostly by sinking it, or scaring the birds away from the gear so they don't get close.
The most common and effective way we found is to drag a buoy behind the boat.
It kind of dances over the water, and it sort of has an erratic pattern, sort of a mobile scarecrow to keep birds away from the hooks as they go over the side.
Some other ways are to use something called a streamer line.
And the streamers basically make contact with the water all through the area where the hooks are still available for the birds.
It keeps the birds from coming into what we call the danger zone above those baited hooks, long enough for the hooks to sink and get out of reach of the birds.
Most of these measures are relatively simple, and in the areas of the Pacific where they're in use, the results are very encouraging.
It is a sweet story in that respect because probably these things are going to work and they're going to work really well.
Given the opportunity, the fishermen themselves know the most about how to solve a problem, and they can try different things day after day.
Industry, agencies, and fishermen are all united in the basic idea of catch fish, not birds.
Despite all these advances, seabird bycatch is still a problem throughout most of the world, particularly for magnificent creatures like the albatross, the gannet, the petrel, and the razorbill. For every bycatch success story, millions of marine fish, birds, and animals are still being injured or killed needlessly. We've pushed life in the oceans to the limit. We've devastated once bountiful fisheries. And we've threatened the existence of fishing communities that have lived off the sea and fed us for thousands of years.
Solutions do exist, but we must make choices. For we have the power to destroy the oceans, and we have the power to save them.